It was in the afternoon and the sun was very hot, heating up the quiet neighborhood as Ada stood in front of the door of a house. Her hands trembling slightly as she knocked softly on the wooden door. A drop of sweat slid down the side of her face because the heat was unbearable. But Ada didn't complain. She was barely 23, yet filled with an unwavering passion for evangelism. It was her calling, her way of fulfilling the Great Commission. This wasn't her first time knocking on someone's door. Each visit felt new, filled with its own uncertainties. Many souls have been won for Christ through her. Her hands clutched her Bible tightly, holding it close to her chest like a shield of protection. Ada didn't know who lived inside, but she didn't need to. To her, every soul was precious, and every home was an opportunity to preach the gospel. The door cracked open, revealing a man whose presence immediately unsettled her. He was tall, his muscular frame barely concealed by the towel he tied loosely around his waist. Suddenly, his towel fell off from his waist, exposing his private parts. Ada froze, her heart pounding like a drum. I'm sorry, sir, she stammered, looking away. I didn't mean to disturb you, sir. The man quickly tied back his towel to cover himself. No need to apologize, he said. I should be the one apologizing. Come in. I rarely get visitors these days. Ada hesitated at first, but still felt a nudge in her spirit to proceed. This could just be another soul to win, she thought. She reminded herself that God's work often took her to uncomfortable situations. As she stepped inside the house, she noticed the untidiness of the living room. Half-empty bottles of alcohol were on the floor and a crumpled shirt on the couch. The living room felt uncared for. Please sit, he said, gesturing to the couch. Ada began her message cautiously, flipping through her Bible. She spoke of hope, redemption, and the boundless love of God. The man whose name she learned was Patrick listened intently. He asked questions about her faith and why she chose to dedicate her life to such a cause. You're quite brave, he said as the conversation deepened. Leaning back in his chair, his eyes lingering on her in ways that made her skin crawl. A young, beautiful lady like you, preaching the word of God and wandering into people's houses alone. Wow. Ada paused, her heart racing. I'm here to share the gospel, sir, she said firmly. God has used me to win many souls for him, and I trust that God protects his servants. The man chuckled, a low, unsettling sound. And what if I told you that you're tempting me with that outfit of yours? Ada looked down at her long ankle length covered dress. It didn't expose any part of her body. Neither was it too tight to show her body shape. Sir, I'm dressed appropriately, she replied, her voice shaking. But if my presence offends you, I can leave. No, Patrick said quickly. It's fine. But I think you need to put on something more decent, sir, Ada retorted. Of course, he replied. He quickly went inside his bedroom to wear a shirt and a trouser. But while in the bedroom, he picked up a chilled bottle of water and injected some substance into it through the side of the bottle without opening or tampering with the cover seal. This was what he usually did to young girls he lured into his home. He had always gotten away with this act on young girls. He returned back to the living room with a bottle of chilled water in his hands. Of course, the cover of the bottled water was still sealed and intact, and it showed no trace of it leaking or being tampered with. Ada, seeing Patrick being properly dressed now, made her feel a little bit at ease. He grabbed a bottle of juice for himself and offered her the bottle of water. "Thank you, sir. I'm okay," Ada said softly, refusing to accept the water. She placed her hands firmly on her Bible and smiled politely. She didn't want the water Patrick was offering, even though she was thirsty. But Patrick leaned closer, his voice playful yet firm. "Oh, come on. It's just water. You've come from under this hot sun, and I guess you must be very thirsty." "No, don't worry, sir. I'm fine. I'm used to walking under the sun," Ada said politely, declining the water again. "It's rude to refuse hospitality, you know," he said. Ada hesitated. Her heart told her to say no again, but she didn't want to offend him. After all, he had been kind and welcoming earlier. Slowly, she reached for the bottle of water. "There we go," Patrick said with a wide grin. "That wasn't so hard, was it?" Ada took a small sip. The water was so satisfying and cool on her tongue. Then she continued to preach, focusing again on her Bible. But as she spoke, something didn't feel right. A strange drowsiness overtook her. Her voice grew slower and softer, her eyelids heavier, and the words she had so passionately memorized began to slip from her mind like grains of sand. Within seconds, her head started to feel heavy, and her vision blurred. The once bright room seemed to spin around her. "Are you okay?" Patrick asked, leaning closer. But there was something in his eyes, a look that made Ada's stomach twist with unease. I don't feel well, sir," Ada stammered, her voice faint. Her Bible and the bottle of water she was holding slipped from her grip, landing on the floor with a thud as her hands became too weak. Before she could say another word, the world around her faded. Patrick quickly adjusted her legs on the couch and had his way with her. When Ada woke up, her head throbbed. The room was eerily quiet and the air felt heavy. She tried to move, but her body was weak and tears welled up in her eyes as she slowly began to understand what had happened. Patrick was sitting across the room. He didn't look kind anymore. His face was cold, his smile gone. "Good you're awake," he said flatly, his voice sharp and without care. Ada's heart pounded in her chest as she sat up slowly, her body aching in unfamiliar ways. Her dress felt disheveled, and her skin crawled with the realization that she was not the same as she had been before. Ada's voice came out as a whisper, trembling with fear and disbelief. What happened? What did you do to me?" Ada tried to speak, but her voice broke. Her tears fell faster now, her heart sinking with pain and confusion. Patrick spun around, his face contorted with anger. "Don't blame me for this," he barked. You came here walking into my house with your holy acts, preaching to me. Do you think my junior man here is inactive?" "I trusted you," Ada whispered, her voice barely audible. "Trusted me? Do you even know me?" He let out a harsh laugh. "No one asked you to trust me. You tempted me, walking in here, acting so righteous. If there's anything, this is on you." His words hit her like a physical blow. Ada clutched her Bible, her knuckles white as she fought back her tears. She wanted to scream, to lash out, but her fear and shame weighed her down. "Get out," Patrick said sharply, his voice echoing through the room. "You should leave," he said, pointing to the door. "You shouldn't have come here in the first place." Ada's hands trembled as she pushed herself up. Her legs felt shaky, but she managed to stand. With every step toward the door, her heart felt heavier. When she stepped outside, the cool night air hit her face. But it didn't help. She felt crushed, her trust broken, her spirit shattered, and she felt her world crumbling. The tears on her face didn't stop as she walked into the darkness. Her mind swelled with emotion, shame, anger, and deep sadness. How could she have been so blind and naive? How could she trust someone she barely knew? She thought. Days turned into weeks, yet the pain of what had happened lingered, growing heavier with each passing moment. She avoided her fellow church members, isolating herself from the community she once loved. Each Sunday, she sat in the farthest corner of the church, her head bowed low, unable to meet the gaze of anyone who greeted her. The vibrant young evangelist, who had once inspired others to walk in faith, now moved like a ghost through her own life. One day, as Ada was checking through the calendar on her phone, she realized she had missed her period. She froze at the thought of being pregnant. She counted the days again and again, praying she had made a mistake. But deep down, she already knew the truth. Fear clenched her heart. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. For the first time in her life, Ada questioned her purpose. She bought a pregnancy test strip to confirm if she was truly pregnant. The results showed she was. She sank to the floor of her tiny apartment, clutching her stomach as tears spilled uncontrollably down her cheeks. "Why me, Lord?" she whispered into the silence. How do I carry on? Who will believe me? I know I've made a mistake to have trusted a total stranger, but this is too much. This is too much for me to bear. In the days that followed, Ada's world became a shadow of what it once was. The light that had driven her every action, the faith that had once been her compass, now felt dimmed by the weight of her secrets. The shame would be unbearable. How could she explain this to her church, to her pastor, or to anyone if she tried to? She imagined the looks of judgment, the whispers behind her back. She could already hear the questions they would ask. Why did you go alone? Why didn't you leave sooner? Ada tried to continue with life as usual, pretending that all was well. But the burden on her was too obvious that members of the church could notice that something wasn't right with her. Her ministry suffered. Her Bible remained closed on her bedside table, unopened and untouched for weeks. She felt like she was unworthy every time she even considered opening it. One Sunday after service, Deaconess Ifoma, one of the senior ministers, approached Ada. Deaconess Ifoma was known for her wisdom and ability to see through people's mask. She had noticed Ada's absence from the church's evangelism efforts and her withdrawn behavior. "Ada," Deaconess Ifoma said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder, "you haven't been yourself lately. Is everything okay?" Ada forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine, ma," she lied. "You don't seem fine," Deaconess Ifoma said, her voice soft but insistent. "Whatever it is, you can tell me. I won't judge you." The words were like a key unlocking a floodgate. Ada's resolve crumbled, and tears poured down her face. Deaconess Ifeoma led her to a quiet corner of the church, away from prying eyes. "Talk to me, Ada," Deaconess Ifeoma urged. Through broken sobs, Ada began to recount her ordeal. The words spilled out of her, each one heavier than the last. She told Deaconess Ifeoma everything: the visit to Patrick's house for evangelism, his inappropriate behavior, and the horrifying aftermath. When she reached the part about discovering she was pregnant, Ada couldn't continue. She buried her face in her hands, shaking with shame and fear. Deaconess Ifeoma's expression hardened as she listened, not with judgment, but with righteous anger. When Ada finished, Deaconess Ifeoma wrapped her arms around Ada, holding her as she wept. "Ada, what happened to you is not your fault. Though you made a mistake to have entered into the home of a man to evangelize," Deaconess Ife said firmly. "But you don't have to carry this burden alone. We will fight this together. You already know I'm a barrister and this is my specialty." Ada looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "But how, Ma? Who will believe me? I just feel so ashamed of myself." "They will believe you," Deaconess Ifeoma said, her voice resolute. "We will get an evidence against him. That man violated your body and he must be accountable. You are not alone in this." The next steps were scary, but Deaconess Ifeoma stood by Ada every step of the way. Together, they filed a report with the police, setting in motion a legal process that Ada had never imagined herself navigating. She had thought that filing the police report would bring her a sense of relief, but instead, it opened a floodgate of emotions she wasn't prepared for. The questions from the officers were cold and clinical, probing into the most vulnerable parts of her experience. "Why did you go to his house alone? Did you say or do anything to encourage him? Why didn't you leave when you felt uncomfortable?" one of the police questioned her. Each question felt like an accusation, a sharp reminder of the judgment she feared. Ada's voice cracked as she answered, her heart pounding with every response she gave. But through it all, Deaconess Ifeoma was by her side. She placed a reassuring hand on Ada's shoulder and spoke firmly when the officers pushed too hard. "She's the victim here. Focus on the perpetrator, not her decisions," Deaconess Ifeoma snapped. The next day, Ada sat nervously in Deaconess Ifeoma's living room, her fingers gripping the edge of her chair. Deaconess Ifeoma had been her rock through the ordeal, offering not only legal expertise, but also the emotional support Ada so desperately needed. Deaconess Ifeoma's calm, measured demeanor, this time, however, seemed charged with a new sense of urgency. "Ada," Deaconess Ifeoma began, leaning forward, her voice soft but resolute. "I've been thinking about this case throughout the night. And remember I told you we need to get an evidence against him. We need something very concrete, something that ties Patrick directly to what he did. But we already filed the police report. Isn't that enough?" Ada replied, unsure of what Deaconess Ifeoma meant. Deaconess Ifeoma sighed. "It's a start, but Patrick's lawyer will argue against it. We need evidence, something that cannot be twisted or denied. And this is needed before the police reaches out to him. A confession from him, Ada, is what we need." If we can get Patrick to admit what he did, it will strengthen our case beyond doubt. Ada felt a chill run down her spine. But how, Ma? He would never confess. Not to the police, and definitely not to me. Deaconess Ifoma's eyes gleamed with determination. That's where we have to be strategic. I have a plan, but it will require courage. And it's not without risk, I must say. Deaconess Ifoma outlined the details of her strategy. Ada would confront Patrick at his home, pretending to seek reconciliation and closure. She would tell him she was pregnant, a news Ada dreaded revealing. And then they would use it as a reason for the visit. The goal was to make Patrick feel safe, as though Ada was seeking his help rather than holding him accountable. I'll come with you, Deaconess Ifoma assured her. I'll wait outside his house and we'll record the entire conversation secretly on my phone. If he admits what he did, we'll have the evidence we need. Ada's breath quickened. The idea of facing Patrick again terrified her. She hadn't seen him since the day she had left his house in tears. What if he gets angry? What if something goes wrong and he tries to take advantage of me again? Ada's voice trembled as she spoke. Deaconess Ifoma reached out and held Ada's hand. That's why I'll be close by, Ada. You're not doing this alone. And we'll also pray for God's protection every step of the way. Though fear still gripped her, Ada knew this was a chance to turn her pain into power. The next day, Ada and Deaconess Ifoma went over every detail of the plan. Deaconess Ifoma handed Ada a small recording device, which she tucked into the pocket of her dress. This device is sensitive enough to pick up his voice, even if you're sitting a few feet away, Deaconess Ifoma explained. But keep the conversation neutral. Don't push too hard. We need him to let his guard down and speak freely. Ada nodded, though her hands trembled as she tested the recorder. What should I even say? I don't even know where I would start from. Tell him the truth about the pregnancy, Deaconess Ifoma advised gently. You don't have to lie. Just let him think you're there because you're confused and don't know what to do. Men like Patrick thrive on manipulation. But if we play this right, he will expose himself. They practiced the conversation several times. Deaconess Ifoma coaching Ada on how to stir the discussion without arousing suspicion. They knelt together to pray. Deaconess Ifoma's prayers were steady and powerful, asking God for wisdom, protection and strength for Ada. The air was heavy with tension as Ada stood in front of Patrick's house. Deaconess Ifoma waited in her car, a short distance away from Patrick's house. Her phone ready to record as soon as Ada stepped inside. Ada's heart pounded as she knocked on the door. She could hear footsteps approaching, and when the door swung open, there he was, Patrick. His expression shifted from surprise to a smirk. Ada, he said, leaning casually against the doorframe. This is a surprise. What brings you here? Ada forced a weak smile. I needed to talk to you, and it's important. Patrick raised an eyebrow, but stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. Ada sat stiffly on the same couch where her nightmare had begun. The memory made her stomach churn, but she forced herself to focus. I don't know who else to turn to, she began, her voice trembling just enough to sound believable. I found out a week ago that I'm pregnant. Patrick's expression froze for a moment before he chuckled. Pregnant? Are you sure it's mine? Ada's hands clenched into fists, but she kept her voice calm. You know it is. I haven't been with anyone else. Patrick leaned back in his chair, his smirk returning. Well, that's interesting. So, what do you want from me? Child support? Or are you trying to trap me into something? I'm not here to trap you, Ada replied, her voice trembling. I just need to understand why this happened. Why did you do what you did to me that day? Patrick shifted uncomfortably, his confidence flattering slightly. Look, Ada, I didn't do anything to you. You came here on your own. Whatever happened after that, well, I don't know what to say. Ada's stomach turned, but she pressed on. You put something in my drink, right? I know you did. Why would you do that if you didn't plan to take advantage of me? Patrick's face darkened. Ada, you need to be careful about what you're accusing me of. Don't let me lose my cool on you. Well, no one will believe you anyway. Patrick, she said, her voice firming slightly. I just want the truth. At least I deserve that much. Patrick hesitated, then shrugged. Fine. You want the truth. You shouldn't have come to my house alone now. I'm a man, Ada. What did you expect? I didn't want you to struggle. It was just a little chloroform that meant no harm. You were sitting there, looking all innocent and beautiful, and I just couldn't resist you. Which man will resist such a beautiful girl like you? Ada felt tears prick her eyes, but she held them back. She had gotten what she needed. After a few more minutes of forced conversation, Ada stood up. I should go, she said, her voice wavering. Patrick smirked again. Yeah, you should go. And don't come back here, Ada. This isn't my problem anymore. Ada left the house, her legs trembling as she walked back to Dickiness Ifoma's car. As soon as she climbed inside, the tears she had held back came pouring out. You did it, Dickiness Ifoma said, hugging her tightly. We got everything we need, Ada. She stopped the recording and played back a snippet of Patrick's confession. The weight of his words were undeniable. Ada wiped her tears, a new sense of strength rising within her. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was fighting back. The church leadership was informed, and to Ada's surprise, many of them rallied around her. They prayed with her, encouraged her, and reminded her that her worth was not diminished by what had happened. One evening, as Ada sat alone in her apartment, she finally opened her Bible again. The pages fell to a verse she had clung to many times before. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 34 verse 18. The words felt like a lifeline, a reminder that even in her darkest hour, God had not abandoned her. When news of Ada's ordeal spread through the church, reactions were mixed. Some members rallied around her, offering prayers and words of encouragement. But not everyone was so kind. Why would she go to a man's house alone? Whispered one elder. She should have known better, muttered another. Ada overheard these whispers during a midweek service, and they cut deep. The judgmental looks from some of the church members who couldn't understand her pain was overwhelming. She had always believed the church was a place of refuge, but now it felt like a battleground. But then Pastor Nnamdi, the senior pastor, addressed the congregation one Sunday morning. As Christians, we are called to protect and uplift those who are hurting, he said, his voice firm. Ada's experience is a reminder of the dangers we face in this world. But it is not her fault. We stand with her as a church, and we will fight for justice alongside her. His words silenced the whispers and reignited Ada's hope. Deaconess Ifoma's help and the love of some of the members who truly cared also gave Ada the strength to keep going. The day the accusation was brought to Patrick's attention, he sat in stunned silence, absorbing the weight of the allegations Ada had laid against him. His reputation, once untouched, was now hanging in the balance. He immediately sought the best lawyer money could buy, someone skilled in twisting the narrative, in bending the truth to serve the guilty. The lawyer went to work immediately, crafting a defense designed to paint Ada not as a victim, but as a manipulative woman with ulterior motives. Few weeks later, they all appeared in court. The courtroom, usually a place of order and professionalism, was tense. The air was thick with the weight of accusations. Ada stepped onto the witness stand. She carried with her the Bible, a symbol of her unwavering faith that had been her anchor throughout the entire ordeal. Each step she took towards the stand felt like a step into the battleground. But Ada was no longer the same woman who had walked into Patrick's home so long ago. She was stronger now, shaped by the very storm that had threatened to consume her. The courtroom fell silent as the judge called the case to order. Ada could feel every pair of eyes on her, and her nerves threatened to overtake her. But she gripped the Bible tightly in her hands, focusing on the promise it held, that justice would prevail, no matter how long the road. Patrick's lawyer, a man known for his sharp tongue and ruthless tactics, stood to cross-examine her. He wasted no time in trying to tear her down, using every trick in the book to discredit her testimony. "Why didn't you leave immediately when you felt uncomfortable?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Ada's heart raced, but her voice remained steady. "I believed he was open to hearing God's word," she replied, each word coming with the conviction of a woman who had nothing left to hide. "I stayed because I trusted him, and I believed I was doing what God called me to do." The lawyer sneered. "And yet, you claim he took advantage of you. You went to his house uninvited. He didn't even know if you existed." Ada's breath hitched in her truth. The pain of those moments, the betrayal she had felt, threatened to overwhelm her. But she swallowed it down, focusing instead on the bigger picture. "Yes," she said, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "He did. He took advantage of me, and no one else deserves to go through what I did." The lawyer pressed on, asking questions meant to tear at Ada's credibility, trying to paint her as a woman who had come to Patrick's house with an agenda and trying to manipulate the situation. But Ada held her ground, her faith and her strength carrying her through each invasive question. Ada's attorney, Deaconess Ifoma, was no less determined than Ada. She had seen firsthand the emotional toll this case had taken on the young evangelist, and now she was prepared to fight tooth and nail to make sure Patrick's crimes were brought to light. Deaconess Ifoma's cross-examination of Patrick's lawyer was a thing of beauty. Each question posed with surgical precision, dismantling Patrick's defense piece by piece. "Mr. Patrick," Deaconess Ifoma said, her voice sharp, "did you or did you not admit in your initial statement that you offered Ada a bottle of water?" Patrick, his confidence beginning to crack, hesitated. I did, but it was just water." Deaconess Ifoma didn't miss a beat. "And that water contained a substance meant to incapacitate her, didn't it?" Patrick's silence hung in the air like a heavy weight. The courtroom grew eerily quiet as the magnitude of the questions settled in. Patrick's lawyer, sensing the shift in the momentum, tried to interject, but Barrister Ifoma was relentless. "You see, Mr. Patrick, the evidence doesn't lie." The judge nodded in acknowledgement, giving Barrister Ifoma the floor to present the next piece of damning evidence, the voice recording. Barrister Ifoma played the recording for the entire courtroom, revealing Patrick's own words, his admission of guilt. His cold, detached tone sent shivers down the spines of everyone present. However, Patrick and his lawyer quickly objected, claiming that the voice on the recording was not his, but rather an AI-generated imitation designed to incriminate him. The case was adjourned by the judge to the following week, allowing time for an expert analysis of the recording to verify its authenticity. Watch out for the part 2 of the story. Jesus said in the book of Matthew chapter 10 verse 16b, "Be wise as serpents and gentle as doves." Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and consider subscribing. Don't forget to click on the notification bell so that when we upload the part 2, you'll be notified as soon as possible. Stay blessed.